Corporate treasury is certainly an exciting topic. Today's focus will be on anti-money laundering, but in the banking industry with everything going on, no doubt corporate treasury is busy as well. Showcase of hands on Ozarks, and who thinks that's the best show ever? Marty Bird, Wendy Bird, they did an incredible thing in that show with their connection with our cartel, and certainly I say incredible facetiously because they were doing very nefarious and illicit activities. One person who wouldn't be with me on the question I just posed is my wife. She thought that show was way too gruesome. After the first 2 episodes, she said, "Peter, this one's on you. I'm gonna go downstairs and watch something else, but you can watch this show by yourself." You might be thinking, what does Ozarks have to do with financial crime and banking? I'll get into that a little bit here today. My goal today is quite simple. My goal today to you is to explain the role of technology in this domain that we call financial crimes. My other goal is to inspire new ways of working. An institution's ability to innovate and deliver amazing outcomes is not just about their technology. It's more about their people, their process, and their focus on culture. Now back to the Ozarks. What does that have to do with banking? Financial institutions have an obligation to identify, detect, and submit cases of anti-money laundering. We do this through what's ultimately called a suspicious activity report, or a SAR. To put it in perspective, in the United States, again, these are US stats, not US bank stats, from 21 to 22, the volume of SARs went up 18%. If you think about the innovation going on in the financial services industry and the illicit activity happening in this world, we know those numbers are only going to continue to increase. You might be thinking, well, how much money does that equate to? A lot. Just in the United States, again, just in the US, the dollar volume on an annualized basis is roughly 2 to 5% of global GDP. That's how big it is in the US. We have to reference the global GDP. On the north side of that, it's roughly around $2 trillion. Now come to the slide behind me. What does that have to do with financial crimes? The blue boxes is a very simple visualization of business process. The technology box is representative of my financial crimes team within my risk organization. As we serve up applications and data, which we'll get to our internal financial crimes team, ultimately, our customers globally are being served. All of this is happening as the words behind me in the top of the slide are hitting us real time, daily, weekly, annually, you name it. Let's double click into a couple of examples. Who's a fan of the Super Bowl? Well, you guys are debating what do you want to drink, what kind of food you want, whether you're more interested in the Super Bowl game itself or commercials, law enforcement and banks are leading and planning for that game weeks ahead of time. As we know, in this country and around the world, at major events like the Super Bowl, drug traffickers, human traffickers, etc., target those events. So what am I thinking about? Certainly the game, but also ensuring my systems stay up because they're needed more than ever in that moment. Certainly as an engineering leader, I worry about that 24/7 by 365, which we'll get into. The war in the Ukraine, when that happened, my heart sank. My empathy, my sadness, and my prayers were with the people of that country and that region. My second thought was about my sanctions technology team. And the 24 hours a day they had to work at the onset of that war, ensuring our sanctions systems were updated as new sanctions actors were being rolled out so that we could do our best for this global fight on financial crime to stop illicit activity. Fentanyl. Fentanyl is killing people. We are all acutely aware of that over the last few years. Those drug dealers need to take their illicit funds and bring them back into banks. So let's dive more into this idea of technology and financial crimes, but let's also talk about people and process. As I talk to my peers at other banks, which I actually just did yesterday about 15 of us from different institutions get together and we compare notes, and we kind of have a Chatham rule of don't share the secret sauce, but this notion of financial crimes, banks tend to pair together because it's a global fight. In those discussions, no doubt we talk about technology. We're technology leaders, but we equally talk about business and business acumen and business process and business problems. Shifting to the second circle there, that's really representative of culture. At US Bank, gone are the days of business requirement documents or project definition documents. Do any of you miss 7 months into a project when somebody says, hey, what about requirement 10.1.4 on page 100 of the BRD? Thanks, but no thanks. We've thrown those in the garbage at US Bank. We've moved to a product model where technology and product have become one team. That's allowed us to set the stage of what we call intellectual curiosity and psychological safety from a culture perspective. I remember a story 2 years ago, not a story, an actual instance 2 years ago where one of my directs came to me and said, Peter, I got a great idea. We're gonna break this capability away from this vendor. I knew this was a high-risk decision that we wanted to make, but there was a massive benefit. We talked to our internal business partners about this. They were on board. We went all the way to tell the vendor that we were doing this. That's in alignment with our core values of doing the right thing. We had a great conversation about it. They supported us. They're still a major vendor for us today. But we failed to tell them one critical step of our process to break this capability away. It was August about 2 years ago. I spent more time in my home office than I did in my bed or with my family, quite frankly. We had major production issues that week. We stubbed our toe, we darn near broke our leg, and the good news is I didn't get fired, nobody got fired, we learned from it. Moving to box 3, building off of that, part of our secret sauce is taking vendor solutions and inspiring product teams by taking those vendor solutions and building custom around vendors. In today's engineering world, configuring a vendor solution is not the sexiest thing. So how do we take the best of both and innovate? Moving to data and actionable insights. As we follow the money, our need to get the data from the front-end system all the way back into the systems my team manages, that data becomes critical. We used to use this term hunting and gathering, where our investigators were going through various systems of record to try to pull this case together. Well, we've now built solutions via API calls and data engineering to take that away. And that's improved our business outcomes. We're also taking things like natural language processing, and we're figuring out how can we increase our outcomes, save our transaction sanction screening team, as an example, thousands of hours a year through using NLP in their adjudication process. We're also looking at automation. We ran really hard to stand up our tech in this space. So we're catching up now on our CI/CD pipelines, our test automation, our batch processing, and much more. Before I leave this slide, we're also thinking more about the future. How can we take our KYC services, know your customer, from a monolithic to a micro-based architecture to manage customer experience while still balancing risk? And our real-time payment rails, how do we ensure our systems are processing in 100 to 200 milliseconds so that end-to-end transaction reaches the customer on time? How many of you use LinkedIn? Do you wonder where those second and third connections come from? They come from graph technology. SARs are increasing by 18% from 21 to 22. We know they're going to grow as the industry innovates. How can we take graph technology to present to a financial crimes investigator and help them detect relationships amongst these nefarious actors much quicker? Is something that we're working on into the future. Can't talk about the future without the cloud. I won't spend too much time here. We know the benefits of the cloud. From the financial crimes domain, our ability to prototype and iterate much quicker using the benefits of cloud, as well as the elasticity and so much more as our traffic increases. And you can't talk about the future without talking about AI. We've heard that twice today, so I'll also be quick here. As an enterprise, we're looking at advancing AI use cases. How can we get more intelligent with AI as our traffic increases? On the engineering side, yes, we're looking at Gen AI. Very early days around developer productivity. Exactly to what you heard earlier, you need to do this safely and securely. So we're still very embryonic and we have a high risk appetite within our companies, so we're being very cautious in terms of how we go about doing that. In closing, I hope you learned something today with my goal to teach you about technology and financial crimes. More importantly, I hope I inspired you on new ways of working. If you're an executive in this room, I ask you to empower your teams to think boldly, to take risks, but more importantly, for you to pick your team up when they fall. If you're a leader reporting to one of those executives, I ask you to manage up and manage down. Exactly what that executive's doing, but your job in setting the culture of your team is foundational. Because again, it's not just the tech that matters. And if you're on an agile team, raise your hand. Not only do your business partners need you, your leaders need you to think big, to think boldly, to take risks. Thank you for the time this afternoon.
Thank you so much. All right, where's the catch box? Who's got a question for Peter? Go for it. Way up there, right behind you.
Peter, Taylor talked about a little bit about data quality being an important aspect to that. What are you doing to ensure that the graph that you're using to analyze money laundering and all the illicit activities have good quality data in there?
Yeah, I mean, data quality is always a big topic at a company of our size. First, it certainly starts with our data governance officer, right, and the standards that we're setting up front for our front end systems. What we're doing within, my organization, if you will, particular to your use case there, is just a lot of from an ETL data engineering perspective, making sure we have the right validation checks along that data pipeline. We're also using entity resolution, a lot of your kind of standard data normalization techniques before we go present that data within the UI, particularly in the graph use case. Graph is interesting because it's extremely new particularly in the financial services arena. And quite honestly, data quality and data standards has certainly been one of our challenges as we launch that into the marketplace. And when I say the marketplace, internally within our bank.
Next question. Oh, up in the back corner there.
In a highly regulated environment, how are the regulators keeping up with some of the AI experiments that you're doing, and how are you able to show your work for them to sort of make sure that you're checking the boxes there?
Yeah, great questions. Well, within our risk and compliance organization, outside of technology, we have obviously, again, a really strong risk management program at our company. So a lot of focus in our second line of defense, managing back with our regulators. To the financial crime side, the regulators have actually asked for more innovation within banks, with respect to financial crimes. We're extremely transparent with them. We pull up with them on a regular basis and really look at that as a value-add partnership.
Do you hear?
They must be having regular meetings, though. There's a lot going on, right?
Oh, absolutely.
All this change,
Yeah.
It's insane. One more question for Peter, and then we'll open it up, and I'll ask our presenters to be available to field many. Jeff?
Peter, how much data sharing takes place between financial institutions? Is there a clearinghouse where data gets reported up, or is it siloed?
It's a great question. Short answer is it gets down to privacy, right? So we've since I've been in the financial crime space over the last 5 years, that question comes up annually. There are consortiums where the big banks are all talking, right? So more, I'd say more the just as I'm talking to my peers, my business partners are talking to the banks, right, of what's going on. They're also talking to law enforcement, right, whether that's FBI, CIA, what have you, comparing notes. But kind of to where you're going, Jeff, in terms of full-blown kind of information exchange, really, privacy is kind of the key limiting factor where that, maybe hasn't taken off to the degree that, the opportunity could exist. Does that help?
I have a
Alrighty, thank you.
follow-up question, actually. Have you ever gotten to do like a Marty Bird kind of case? I mean, is
Yeah,
that,
and
is that
when Molly
really
and I
what
were
you do?
talking about that, she, maybe asked me to get more into those details, and unfortunately, I just can't. But I do get an opportunity to hear a briefing regularly from our investigators, and it's fascinating stuff. If you haven't watched Ozarks, check that out. If you're really interested in diving more into the world of financial crimes without the gruesomeness that is Ozarks, check out a show called Dirty Money on Netflix. Particularly as we enter the cold months in Minnesota and we stay inside, Dirty Money is another good show to really kind of get some 411 on what's going on in that space.
Excellent. Thank you for those entertainment ideas. Another round of applause for Peter.